working on the computer as well.
So we would like to give a special thanks to our sponsors for making this event happen. That includes the ANAC Secret Society and the Georgia Tech College of Computing for helping sponsor this event and allowing us to have the foothold on campus to actually make this event come true. Today, we would like to also share with you guys our own project here at Libre Tech, which is called Libre Linker. So this is Georgia Tech's student-run open software initiative where anybody is free to submit their own free software or hardware projects to our website, and it is viewable at any time from www.librelinker.us. These are all projects run by Georgia Tech students, faculty, whatever, and they have a direct connection with Libre Tech Collective. So we would like to encourage everybody to please check out this website, see if there's any free software projects you would like to get active on campus with, then we will get started. Libre Tech Collective is honored to host Dr. Stallman. This is a huge event for us, and it was featured on a couple different websites, most notably TechRights and its boss, as well as the Free Software Foundation itself. So we would like to also thank them for their support of covering us and allowing more people to come here. So with that said, Dr. Stallman has asked that we play a quick 14-minute video, and we will get started here shortly.
I wanted to say that because there's a reason why I showed that 14-minute video. I practiced to deliver that talk with those words and make it fast, and therefore it's the best way to present the basic ideas of the free software movement quickly, leaving more time for other things to be said. So here we go. Oh, that computer technology.
That would be Microsoft. Wow, that's lovely. Well, that's unfortunate. Codec unavailable. Wow, thank you.
It was fortuitous.
They had to keep us down somehow.
This is Microsoft PowerPoint. I think you made your point.
What did you say? I couldn't hear her. Probably
Go to the website
I
you
couldn't
love.
hear it.
I said if this is Microsoft PowerPoint, I think you made your point.
Well, I would never have a presentation in that format. Microsoft or any non-free software to do our work.
Yes, sir.
Each new activity of life can bring with it new human rights that are necessary. And the human rights depend on each other. If you lose one, it becomes harder to maintain the others. So nowadays, computing is so important in society that the freedoms of free software are among the human rights that society must establish and protect. Thus, how to help? Well, you can write free software. You can organize groups to campaign and persuade schools and governments to move to free software. You can help other people when they have trouble using free software or help them install it. You can say free software and spread the philosophical ideas. Moving to free software is the first step in the liberation of cyberspace. But of course, we also use the internet. We need other freedoms there, like network neutrality and putting an end to surveillance of people in general.
Now I've got to start looking at my notes about what topics to cover today. Is my mic working? That's good. So, I spoke of the importance of reverse engineering. Universities should teach students to do reverse engineering. It should help them focus on the projects that will remove obstacles to winning freedom. For instance, peripherals for various computer models and for Snoop phones are obstacles to running free software to replace the non-free systems that they normally come with. Reverse engineering is the path by which we can overcome obstacles like that. So there should be projects teaching clever students to do this. And by the way, it's also a profitable field of business. Businesses want reverse engineering done too. So it's good in every way. We need more people learning to do it. And once you're doing it, don't forget the point that this is the way we can overcome intentional obstacles to our freedom. The most important thing in the free software movement that I didn't cover in the video is copyleft. You see, every work that is written is automatically copyrighted. That is a consequence of a harmful treaty called the Berne Convention, which the United States was pressured into signing around 1980. So as a result, lots of things nobody ever particularly wanted to monopolize or restrict are restricted by default. So if I could write a program and write on it, Richard Stallman, say you could do whatever you want with this code. Well, it would be free software that way. At least my version would be. But anybody else could make a modified version and then have a copyright on those changes. And by default, that version would not be free. So I didn't want my free software to have to compete with everybody's improved version of my own code. So I figured out a way to use copyright law to prevent that. So I drew up a statement of copyright permission. I release a program, I say copyright Richard Stallman or copyright Free Software Foundation. The point is what I say then. I don't just say you can do whatever you like with this. I say you're free to run this, to make modified versions, to redistribute exact copies and redistribute your modified versions, the 4 freedoms. But there are conditions on redistribution. When you redistribute a copy that is modified, you must put the same permissions on your modifications. In other words, your modified version must be free in the same way, free and copylefted. This way, everybody's free to make modified versions and release them, but those have to be free also. And it propagates. Copyleft is extremely important, so it's no surprise that big companies like Google and Apple, companies that do not have our freedom at heart and that are very often evil, are pushing the community to think that copyleft is not really nice. At least it's not really nice to Google and Apple and other big companies that perhaps don't merit your consideration as much as human rights do. So if you care about free software, I suggest you keep the code free by releasing it under copyleft. The recommended way is this program can be used under GPL version 3 or later. The latest version is version 3, but someday there may need to be a version 4. And by saying 3 or later, we avoid version incompatibility because the old programs can advance to version 4. Although, if it says 3 or later, people will always be allowed to use it under GPL version 3. That will never be taken away. So, there's a lot of talk about the buzzword, quote, artificial intelligence, unquote. I don't use that the way most people do. There are some programs I would judge to be artificial intelligence. But what is intelligence? Intelligence is the capacity to know and understand, at least within some domains. If it could know and understand all sorts of things that people can, then it would be a human level intelligence. There can be lower levels of intelligence than that, which are nonetheless intelligence. But nowadays, people often use the term artificial intelligence for things that aren't intelligent at all because they don't understand anything and they don't know anything. For instance, and that's in fact where we find this buzzword being promoted the most for large language models, bullshit generators, as I call them, because they don't know anything. They generate text and they don't understand really what that text means. They don't notice if their algorithm produced text that is simply mistaken. They do that without batting a virtual eyelash. So you can't trust anything that they generate. And so I decided not to be part of their campaign to convince people that those things are intelligent. Every time you call them AI, you are endorsing the claim that they are intelligence, and they're not. So let's refuse to do that. So I've come up with the term pretend intelligence. We can call it PI. So if a system can really understand statements in some domain, maybe it's real artificial intelligence within that domain. But if it can't, then it's pretend intelligence. At least if somebody calls it AI, then it's pretend intelligence. And if we start saying this more often, we might help overcome this marketing hype campaign that wants people to trust those systems and trust their lives and all their activities to the control of those systems and the big companies that develop and control them. By the way, as far as I can tell, none of them is free software. Some of them have parts that are free software. Now, in the past decade or so, we have seen intense pressure on people to run non-free programs. Businesses won't deal with you. Some won't deal with you unless you run non-free software. Airline websites, I've noticed for many years, I can't use them. They try to send non-free software to run in my browser, and my browser won't let that run, so those pages don't work. If I want to get an airline ticket, I phone the company. That's the only way I can do it. Or I guess I could go to the airport. I live pretty near the airport. I could go there and buy a ticket. Might even be a feasible, convenient way. Although different airlines are in different terminals, so I might have to travel around a bit to compare. Anyway, and there are even governmental websites that won't talk to you unless you run non-free software. Well, I won't let anything pressure me like that. It was around 1996 that GNU plus Linux was running smoothly enough and handled the peripherals in our computers so that we could actually install it there. So we put GNU/Linux into all our computers, and we had no non-free software in them. And this was the day of our escape. And I was determined that this escape be permanent. So ever since then, anytime someone suggested, or even worse, tried to insist that we run some non-free software, any piece of non-free software, I saw that as trying to spoil the liberation that we have won with hard work. And my response was, no. Whatever convenience you're offering us, whatever work it takes to refuse, we won't do that. And I'm still refusing to backslide. And this is extremely important. It's not just a matter of how I feel, although I hope you will learn to feel it too. It's a matter of maintaining the freedom that we have won, rather than letting it go. And there's a lot of pressure which you've already encountered to surrender it. Many of you probably are used by anti-social media. I never have been. When I found out what was going on, I was sort of disgusted by it. And I objected to the fact, for instance, that Facebook required people to give their real names. You shouldn't do that to people. Tracking and identifying people is the platform for repression. And we can see that repression happening now in this country. So I was always against it even before you had to run non-free software to do it. But most people are pressured into doing that without even thinking of these moral questions. And that's because it is a very widely used communication mechanism. The major ones are. If I set up a system for people to communicate with each other and 5 people were using it, you probably wouldn't feel much pressure to start using it too. But when, say, 500 million people are using it, you might feel pressure. You might feel, I can't refuse that. What would I be sacrificing? Oh no, I have to surrender. It's a shame, but I'll get used to it. And the problem is, once you give in like this, you become part of the problem. This is called the network effect. The more people use a particular communication system, the more attractive it is to others, but that attraction can be seen as a pressure as well. It just depends on your point of view, which one you call it. And most people think it's impossible to refuse. So I refuse. I'm really firm. No matter what reason there might be for me to start using that non-free system, it's not worth it. The feeling of defeat I would feel from having surrendered. So I just keep refusing and keep refusing and keep refusing. I look for ways to talk to those people working around it. That's that. And I hope you will start. I'm sure that this university, like most universities, pressures students to use non-free software. For instance, I'm told it gives people Microsoft email accounts, which normally require people to run Microsoft's unjust, non-free, therefore unjust, software to receive and maybe send mail. Well, you shouldn't do that. But there's a solution. You can get yourself another email account, one that you can use without non-free software, and then say, forward my email to this address. And then the email that would have gone into that Microsoft email account comes to you somewhere else, and you can read it and you can send the replies. And you can, if you like, you can have if you're using Emacs to send your mail, you can arrange that it will automatically change the reply to field so that the replies will go to the university's Microsoft email account, and it will come to you to read with free software. This is a very easy way to resist. People, though, often think that using the Microsoft software is merely an inconvenience. They're used to thinking about how convenient or inconvenient is this program. But the first thing you should think of is, this is an injustice, and I'm being pressured into endorsing it and propagating it and helping to pressure other people. It's your duty to go to that small effort to avoid upholding wrong. It's an opportunity to do something that will help society resist non-free software, because this is one of the easiest cases. Start with these, and then look for other instances of pressure to join in injustice and campaign against those. Sometimes it will be necessary to get a lot of people together to demand that the university offer another way. But you can win fights like that, because what you're demanding is not going to be a disaster for anyone. It's just respect for your freedom. The people who have been pressured by one of these network effects into spreading unjust computing, I refer to them as victim co-perpetrators. First, they're victims. They're pressured into doing something that surrenders freedom. That's being a victim. But once you surrender it, you become part of the pressure on other people, the same pressure. But if once you've surrendered, you're now on the wrong side of it. That's why I say co-perpetrators. First, you're the victim, but if you yield, you become a co-perpetrator as well, which is why, morally speaking, you should not yield. So, I promised to talk about a long list of injustices that free software is a shield against. Because nowadays, almost all non-free software is malware. Well, what do I mean by malware? It means it violates people's freedom and their security. But what does security mean? The computing industry, when it talks about security, means maintaining the company's control over what this computer is doing. So when Microsoft talks about the security of Windows, that really, if you look at what they say violates it, what they really mean is Microsoft's control over a computer that might be yours, that belongs to somebody. Whereas I say security means that the owner of the computer's control over the computer is respected and defended. So anything that denies that person control over the computer is a security hole. So for instance, when Microsoft requires people to connect to a Microsoft server and give their personal data in order to let get Microsoft to allow the system to work. That's a security law. It's intentionally introduced by Microsoft. It used to be that there were ways to avoid this, and not too long ago they eliminated those methods to bypass this. As far as I can tell, everyone who gets a new Windows computer is required to make an account at Microsoft Central with identifying information. Now, I think it should be illegal to sell computers like that, period. But it's the unjust companies that have the political power, not the few of us who realize that the status quo is not just. So the point is, whenever there's a discussion about security, it's likely to be a discussion at cross purposes. Microsoft is talking about defending Microsoft's control over people's computers, and Apple is talking about maintaining Apple's control over people's computers, and Google is talking about maintaining Google's control over people's computers. And none of those companies is trying to defend users' control over their own computers. But that's what free software respects. If you don't want malware, and if you understand malware as meaning software designed to hurt the user, then you look at all the examples, you'll see that non-free software tends to be malware because it's designed by developers that have a vested interest in making it malware. When the users run non-free software, that's the developer's opportunity to mistreat the users through malware. The computing press doesn't talk about this issue very much. It does sometimes criticize egregious malicious functionalities, but it doesn't see how broadly this issue applies to non-free software. It doesn't recognize that when programs are non-free, this is what's likely to happen. Now, part of the reason why our community is weak in this is the term open source. The term open source was coined in 1998 by people who wanted to who didn't value freedom, they liked free software. They wanted to extend free software. They wanted businesses to develop and sponsor free software, but not particularly because of freedom. They didn't see a non-free program as an injustice, the way I do. So they made up a new term, open source, which didn't directly refer to freedom at all. And they attached to it a set of ideas and philosophy that doesn't talk about freedom at all. If you compare what the open source initiative says with what the GNU Project and the Free Software Foundation say, you'll see the difference is stark. We say this is about freedom for people like you who use computers. And they don't ever say that. This is why when one of them called me and told me about this new term and said, we'd like you to start to join us in using it, my immediate response was, I'll have to think about this. It wasn't clear to me that I should say no, but I was worried about it, and so I said, I'll tell you tomorrow. By the next day, I had realized it would be a disastrous thing to do, that we had to keep campaigning for freedom respecting free software. And so you can see what I have to say about this in GNU.org/philosophy/open source misses the point.html. Of course, it doesn't just miss the point by accident. They don't want to hit that point. They avoid it. But that article explains every aspect of how the two philosophical camps are similar and how they are different. But one thing is clear, the term open source is never going to lead people to unite and resist attempts to make them run non-free software. The free software movement does that, and we need your support. And one implicit kind of support is just stop saying open source. Say free software, say Libre software. You know, there are various ways to emphasize this is a matter of freedom. We're going to fight. Because that's what it takes to defend freedom against organized efforts to take it away. And there are plenty of organized efforts to take away freedom in our computers. Some organized by governments, some embodied in laws, like for instance, the age verification idea, which in practice always requires users to be adults to be identified. It shouldn't have to, but the way that the methods they permit and have set up all do. And that's unjust surveillance, but it's imposed by laws. There's been no campaign to require a compromise so that you can prove you're an adult without their knowing who you are. So, and then there's the chat control idea in the European Union, where they want to require a backdoor in every device that can do end-to-end encryption, so that in case you might be a terrorist, they can look at every encrypted message you send to anybody, or maybe some sort of dissident who doesn't agree with the official ideology. So, what are the likely injustices, the common, typical injustices of non-free software? Well, one of them is surveillance. By the way, chat control would effectively prohibit free software in those devices, because if users could change the software, they'd be able to remove the backdoor. This is one of the important things about free software. You can remove malicious functionalities from it. So that's the basic way of allowing society to defend itself from malicious functionalities. So many products will automatically upload the user's data that's going through them. They're designed for surveillance. There was even a sex toy that was designed so it could be controlled over the internet. I suppose that could be fun. But how did it work? Well, the commands to the device had to pass through a particular server that belonged to the manufacturer. So whoever you wanted to send commands to your device, you gave that someone permission to send commands to it through the manufacturer's server, which means that the manufacturer knew what all the commands were, and I expect knew who was sending them to, and knew who you were too. This is something that nobody should have been permitted to know. But that wasn't enough. All the responses went through that server as well. So it could probably tell various things about you from that. And people found out that the device had been built with a thermometer, and the thermometer readings were sent back through that server too. Well, with a thermometer, the manufacturer could tell when the device was in contact with a human body. And I speculate also how it was in contact with a human body. And this thermometer was there purely for surveillance. It's not something human users needed to know. So this device was the essence of malice. But this is standard practice. I have a printer. The printer has non-free software in it, but no one can ever change it. How do I make sure no one can ever change it? It can never talk to the internet. It's on a separate Ethernet, which has only 2 machines on it, the printer and my laptop when it's there plugged in. That's the only thing that makes it safe. You can't trust the printers that companies make these days if they're allowed to phone home. So you gotta block them. So another malicious functionality is digital restriction management. The nasty thing that Spitify and Netflix do. They put the work that you've obtained in a secret encrypted format. The idea is you wouldn't be able to ever decrypt them. And this is to control the user. Well, I despise DRM, and I have no copy of anything with DRM. I don't want any copy of anything with DRM. Whatever it is, I never want it so badly that I would bow down to DRM. So I say, out, damn Spotify, and flick off Netflix. There are backdoors that can sabotage machines. Windows, for many versions, has had a universal backdoor. Microsoft could and still can forcibly change the code in any way whatsoever, as far as we know. They can put in malicious functionalities, like you've got to identify yourself to use supposedly your computer. And there are other programs with backdoors as well. The Amazon swindle has a backdoor to allow remote deletion of books. We found out about this when somebody discovered that his copy of 1984 had been deleted. How appropriate. Well, a device that can do that is a vicious and malicious device. You know, it's irrelevant to discuss why they deleted something. That's a side issue. The point is, they shouldn't have had the ability to delete any of the user's books. If they can, then that product should be rejected entirely. There are forced upgrades and downgrades, sometimes compelled, like if you don't install this upgrade, soon your machine won't be able to talk to anything anymore, or won't be able to talk to us, and that would be such a bad loss that you would, of course, install the upgrade or downgrade or whatever it is. We We find systems designed to be addictive. A lot has been written about that, I'm sure you understand that. But the point is, in some cases, this is partly the result of the client software. Even if part of the addictiveness is implemented in a server, if the client were free, it could do things to reduce the addictive effect. Like it might save up notifications and only show them to you when you're interested, instead of right away to teach you to constantly pay attention. That would reduce the addictive effect. And users could do that by changing the free client, even though they can't change the server. Likewise with various kinds of dark patterns. If there's a free client, you can change the free client and defeat some kinds of dark patterns. Censorship is also possible, and non-free programs facilitate centralized control of censorship. Coercion on other activities. I read about something called Movie Pass, which was going to use eye tracking to make sure that you weren't looking at anything else while you were playing a movie through their system. So they can even take control over your activities outside of the device. If they can whatever they can monitor, they can control. But if you had free software, you could just modify it so that it would always say that you're staring at the device, even if that's not true. The right to make your software lie for you is absolutely crucial. No one must ever have the right to ask you a question and demand an accurate answer. That translates into power over you. Often they can force obsolescence. E-waste is one of the consequences of non-free software. You know, they say, oh, well, the new version of our system doesn't run on that model anymore. So they essentially compel you to buy a new one, even though the old one was working fine. If it were running free software, the free software would still be maintained for many years longer, as long as users care. In fact, free software is famous for making it possible to support computers that are quite old. And then sometimes the device requires a subscription. The sex toy is an example of that, and the printer doesn't exactly require being in contact. It never is in contact with its manufacturer, but it continues to print. But there are devices that won't work unless they get into regular contact, such as to verify you've got a subscription of some sort. Any device that can contact some company to verify you're still permitted to use it is malicious. That should be illegal, I think, but in any case, it's a reason to reject that product. Sometimes there is remote shutoff. This is something that John Deere tractors are famous for. And interestingly, when the Putin forces invaded Ukraine, they captured some tractors and took them to farms in Russia, and then they were remotely shut off. And people cheered at this when I said, well, in this one case, it's a good thing, But the existence of that remote shut-off capability is intolerable because the intended targets are American farmers. And it's an injustice when the manufacturer can shut off their equipment. And they can often use their non-free software to create incompatibility. The new version of this won't work with those other systems anymore. But you need to install the new version because there are now things you're compelled to interoperate with that only the new version will handle. With free software, the users can fix that. But in general, insecurity that users can't fix is one of the consequences of non-free software. Censoring what applications you can install is common. That might be part of chat control. Google is talking about new restrictions on direct loading of applications, which would screw the free application App Store F-Droid. But basically, if you are running non-free software, you can't trust your computing. It was not developed to do what you want. Of course, it will to some extent do what you want. If it never did what you wanted, you'd probably throw the thing away. But there are sure to be exceptions, times when it's set up to impose on you rather than serve you. And the only way to prevent that is by insisting on free software. So, when can you trust your computing? Well, if you do it by running free software on a computer you control, then you can trust it. That doesn't guarantee there are never mistakes and errors. Errors are, to err is computing. But at least there won't be intentional mistreatments in the software. But if you use non-free software, you can't trust it. It's likely in some circumstances to be programmed to mistreat you. If you do your computing on somebody else's computer, say a server, and somebody says, oh, don't do that thing with software on your own machine, send the data here, we'll do this thing for you, and send you back the results. Well, that might be convenient in some ways, but you can't control what they're doing. So it's a step back for your freedom. And I carefully avoid ever accepting such offers. I'll talk to websites for the purposes of communication with an organization, but I won't do it to do my own computing. That has to be done with free software that I can install. And another situation where you can't trust it is when a program gets sent to your browser and just runs, and you don't get a chance to decide whether you want it changed. That's what most websites do nowadays, and I don't let their non-free software run. There are websites I can't use because of that. For instance, every airline's website is totally useless for me, and train and bus websites tend to be totally useless for me. It's a shame. At my age, I need more doctor's appointments, and I can make those appointments by phone, but they want me to make them through a website that sends a lot of non-free JavaScript, which I won't run, so I can't use it. But I also noticed something since I wanted to have a more thorough judgment of the site's conduct, I looked at the terms and conditions, and I discovered a sucker clause. The typical sucker clause says, we may change these terms and conditions. If you continue to use the site, you will be held to have accepted the new conditions even if you have not seen them. Now this, I think, should be illegal, but it's not, and so I never agreed to, if you have to actually get to the point of saying I agree, I won't do that unless I've read the conditions and concluded that they're okay. And I would never conclude they're okay if they had a sucker clause. And it's a good thing I rejected that, because that company that makes those patient gateways, it's called Epic. I read in news that from a newspaper that it had put into its terms and conditions something where the users promise that they won't sue over alleged mishandling of their personal data. They can only go to arbitration, which is rigged against the users. So by applying my general principle, I protected myself from that too. And of course, these hospitals and clinics are constantly pushing their patients to sign up to this, even if it means signing away their legal rights. So, but I also won't run the non-free software that they send to me. So basically, but even if the JavaScript code happens to be free, it's still the case that you'll automatically be running the version that the site is sending to you. And if the site changes that code, what you run automatically changes. It should be up to you which version to install. It should be up to you if you want to change it or use a version someone else has changed for you. So, I guess it's time for me to switch to questions. But basically, please join the Free Software Foundation. We need your support. And please join in pressuring the university to start respecting your freedom. It's not that hard to win such fights if you're persistent, not frantic and screaming, but steady and firm. You can find the Free Software Foundation at fsf.org. And at this point, it's time for questions. So, have you handed out the papers yet?
Not yet. I will be coming around with these note cards. Ladies and gentlemen, please fill these out. Use your best handwriting, and we will get these back to Dr. Stallman.
I asked people to hand in questions written because I have some hearing problems, and if we passed around the microphone, that takes a long time. It's a big, boring waste of time. And then half the time I won't be able to hear the question you said, and I'll have to do something so that I get to hear it, and that's even more boring, wasted time. But I can read much more clearly than I can hear. So by writing your questions down, it goes much more smoothly, much less boring waste of time, and many more questions actually answered. So, is there someone who can collect the questions now? Is there anyone else helping? Is there anyone else helping, who can go around collecting questions.
Yes, sir.
Can somebody please help out? Yeah, I mean, you're not under pressure to finish writing right away, but some people are surely finished, so.
Anybody want to be the first question?
Oh, nothing has been written. Can't imagine others. Thank you.
Sorry. No worries. Would you like one?
So this question.
I'm sorry?
Did Microsoft invent version incompatibility? I don't know, but I don't think so. You see, incompatibility between versions of the program is inconvenient, but sometimes there are important reasons to make an incompatible change. It's that I wouldn't put that down to malice. Now, but most version incompatibility just means, oh, you can still do this, but the way you have to do it, the commands you have to use are different. That is not malicious. On the other hand, saying, we've decided not to let you do this anymore, that's nasty. Was Microsoft the first company to release software with known undisclosed bugs? I have no idea. But with non-free software, that tends to happen. It may have unknown, undisclosed bugs too. The point is that users can't fix them. What is your favorite book? I don't have a favorite book. Sorry. You said AI is a misnomer because it doesn't understand. Well, I said sometimes, usually it's a misnomer, but there are programs that do understand some things within some domains. And those, I'd say, are artificial intelligence. A lot of these programs do medical diagnosis. They're programs that can analyze data, such as images, and do a better job of diagnosing certain maladies than a skilled human. If the human's intelligent, I guess the program is too. But doesn't this need a definition of understanding? No. We have an everyday idea of what it means to understand. And I think that's good enough for this purpose. If you demand a philosophical analysis of every concept you use, you're basically setting yourself up to be unable to think about any question in a useful way because you run into a deep philosophical question of what it means. Do you use a dial-up telephone? I'm not sure. I mean, do I use a landline? I'm actually not sure. An actual rotating dial, no, I don't have that in any of my phones. But I don't use a cellular phone. I don't have one. Because I learned in the early 2000s that they track the locations of the system. The phone network tracks the locations of phones, and these phones can be made to listen and transmit all the time. And to me, that says Orwellian, and I don't want an Orwellian tracking and listening device. And then it says with wives. Maybe that means with wires. Yes and no. I don't have a copper pair landline because they charge an arm and a leg for that. I have, however, a telephone that doesn't talk through cellular technology and or radio of any sort, and that doesn't say where I am when I'm not actually talking on it. And those are the benefits of rejecting cellular technology. I start contributing to free software. Well, first, learn to program well, develop various things, get good at it, and then find a free program that interests you and look for things that could be improved. Look and see what the maintainers and developers to-do list suggests. Pick a project that you're interested in and start working on it. And then when you've got your change working, contact the developers and say, do you like this code? Did I do a good job? Do you want to install it? But nowadays there's a pitfall. So many free programs are hosted on an unjust site called github.com, which requires people to run non-free software simply to make an account. And then sometimes the developers will give no way to contact them except through using a GitHub account. I can't reach them. I hope you won't yield to that kind of pressure. And please don't ever do that yourself. What do you think about homomorphic computing on, well, he says cloud. I reject the term cloud because there is no cloud, only computers belonging to others. The term cloud is a way of saying to people, never mind where this data really is, never mind where this computing is really done. You don't need to know, but you do need to know. Microsoft recently told European governments that it wasn't sure it could refuse to send Europeans' personal data to the US if the US government were to demand it. European governments want to respond to that by saying, you will now spin off the part of your company that works in Europe, because otherwise we'll wipe you out. But I never use the term cloud to describe things being done by servers. It makes a difference whose servers, and it makes a difference where they are. Social media isn't free software, however. Well, social media are not software. They're computing activities. It's a different kind of concept. You know, if we talk to each other through phones with computers in them, our conversation is not software. It's being implemented by software, but the conversation itself is not the same thing as the software. They have a relationship. They're both part of the scenario. But if we want to think clearly, we've got to separate them, recognize what the relationship is, and be clear in our concepts. However, they're powerful tools to spread and promote ideas and philosophies. They may be. I won't run a non-free program. I will not, under any circumstances, accept running a non-free program, no matter what I might benefit from doing so. And there's a reason for this. Nothing really has to be done by non-free software. If we as a society were really determined to have freedom, we could get free software made to do all those things, and we could make it the usual way. Once you surrender to running non-free software, then you're going to be tied down like Gulliver with non-free software. So I've concluded that whatever short-term practical benefits there may be to using the non-free software, in the end you lose by doing so. You defeat your purpose. How can software be Libre and not gratis? Well, in 1985, I sold magnetic tapes with copies of GNU Emacs on them. And I charged $150 per tape. Now, this was much more than the actual cost of a magnetic tape and an hour or so to write it and mail it. I was making a profit, which was fine with me. I quit my MIT job. I needed to make money somehow, and this was an ethical way to do it. Now, of course, you could download the same code across the internet, but that didn't make it wrong for me to sell magnetic tapes with this code. When you were talking about the John Deere tractors that were taken by force by the Russians, how did the remote shuttle stop something inherently hardware? Well, because there's a lot of software delivered in that hardware. That you could, I suppose you could build an automatic shut-off with pure circuitry. Whatever you can do with a program, you could make a chip with special purpose circuitry to implement the same computation, and it would do the same thing. But it doesn't matter that much which one it is, except that the more complicated the activity gets to be, the harder and more inconvenient it is to use fixed hardware to do that. So you want to do it with software. In practice, people are not going to do enormous amounts of stuff with special purpose circuitry. They're going to put in a processor and software. And so you get reasonable results by saying, we demand to be free to change the software. How do you expect to cover costs for free software? Well, first of all, there may not be costs. You may be having fun developing it. A lot of people do, and a lot of people don't. In a world that's free, people who want to contribute to free software do, and those who don't want to, they don't. Nobody's forced to. On the other hand, it might be reasonable for a university to have a study activity in which part of what people do is write changes to do jobs that various free programs developers would like done, and work on them to the point where the developers are satisfied and accept the contribution, and then you get a grade of successful contribution to a collective project. This is tremendous education. This would be a wise way for universities to make sure that their students are capable, not only that they have the knowledge, but also the right attitude to be able to get this done. Do you still use T-Scale on a Libre boot ThinkPad? I do. The herd, basically 15 or 20 years ago, it turned out that the GNU herd had architectural flaws and no one saw a solution for it. And so we stopped prioritizing that. Too bad. But the crucial thing is to have a kernel that permits running without non-free software. How do the ideals of free software mesh with software developers need to get paid for their work, unquote? Well, this person used the word creator. I don't refer to software developers as, quote, creators, unquote. That's a PR campaign to try to make us feel that the people who write the software are somehow more important than everyone else, and they deserve to be bowed down to and have power over others. Well, I don't agree with that. Speaking as a software developer myself, I don't think I deserve that kind of power over anyone, and I don't think you do either. But basically, the idea that they need to get paid for their work is embodies strange assumptions. Now, I may need to get paid for something. I may need to get a job. But that doesn't mean that I'm entitled to have power over the people who run programs I've developed. You couldn't justify taking away people's freedom that way just so that I or someone else could squeeze money out of them. On the other hand, there is a lot of paid work on free software. Most software development that is paid is development of software specifically for one user, maybe a business that uses it. And they have to pay for this. That won't get done unless they pay. But they should still get it as free software. What technologies would you classify as AI? Mostly they're pattern recognition of various sorts. I read that there's a program that can tell you very quickly and accurately whether a picture of an insect shows the very dangerous Asian hornets that kill honeybees, or some other kind of hornet which is not invasive and is not particularly a threat. This is important. It's crucial to find those Asian hornets and wipe them out. And this program will help people do it. What is the best guard for ordinary people against malicious software that is free and Libre? Well, indeed, it is possible to put malicious code into a free program, just as it's possible to put it into a non-free program. However, it's a lot easier for users to detect this and fix it if it's a free program. And that's basically what happens. You're much less likely to find malicious code in a free program that other people can read than you are in a non-free program whose source code hardly anyone is allowed to see. In fact, people have become accustomed to seeing lots of kinds of malicious code in non-free programs. The developers don't even pretend it's not there. They admit it's there. But there's a tendency to inculcate the idea that if a company intentionally made a program do something nasty to users, that makes it okay. Like people know that Netflix has DRM, that Google makes DRM, that Amazon makes DRM, and somehow they exempt these from the category of malicious code. Oh, why is selling software permitted? Why did I define things that way? At the beginning, I was quite clear that selling a tape with a copy of GNU Emacs on it didn't deny anybody's freedom, so it wasn't wrong. If you paid $150 and I sent you a mag tape, you would get exactly the same stuff that you could download over the internet. And it wasn't designed to restrict you in any way, and you were free. Either way, you had the freedom to redistribute it, change it, and distribute the modified version. That's why I wasn't doing anything wrong by charging money for the mag tapes. And if you suppose you couldn't afford $150, but you had 10 friends. Suppose you weren't on the internet so you couldn't download it. But you could get together and put in $15 each and order one mag tape and then make copies for all of you. So selling in this way wasn't going to prevent people from using it. It wasn't going to leave some people in the lurch. So for reasons like this, I concluded it was a legitimate thing to do. Because remember, free doesn't mean nobody's getting paid. That's not what it's about. Free refers to freedom. What are your thoughts on, you wrote copywritten, but copyrighted is the right word. It has nothing to do with writing. Non-free, non-software works. Take a look at gnu.org/philosophy/copyright versus community.html. I propose some changes in the copyright system, but not total abolition. And I propose better methods of supporting authors in various ways that do not depend on trying to prevent people from sharing. How do you imagine the economics of the software industry under free software? Well, for the most part, the paid software development industry develops custom software for lots of businesses. And that would still be a business. Suppose every one of those companies was required to release the software it developed as free software. Well, they'd still want to be paid for writing it. So that business would keep going basically the way it is. Do you have concerns that normalizing government regulation of technology, for example, Windows-like logins, could affect hobbyists' abilities to distribute work and other freedoms? Example, 3D printers in NY. I don't know what that refers to. Could someone tell me, whoever wrote this question, what is it?
I didn't write it, but they're proposing regulations to limit the sale of 3D printers in New York and to stop them from for manufacturing.
I think that's basically absurd. I'm not particularly in favor of 3D printing of guns, but to limit 3D printers is outrageous. But it's a fact that governments can make laws, and I don't see how we could possibly make it impossible for governments to make bad or unjust laws, except to be thinking about these questions. Should I use Emacs over VI? As long as it's a free version of VI, then there's no moral reason one way or the other. But Emacs loves every user and will be sad if you don't love it back. How do you approach mobile computing? Do you have a smartphone? No, certainly not. It's an Orwellian tracking and surveillance device. Even the non-smartphones were tracking and surveillance devices, and for that reason I decided not to have one. And of course, repressive governments make use of that tracking. Now that we have a rather repressive government in the US, we're all in danger from that, except for those of us who don't carry one of those things. Why are you so confident that free softwares are good? are good and important? Well, free programs tend to be good because if users like them, users will work on them to make them good. There have been some examples showing that we do a very good job of developing things. And if you don't think we did a good enough job, please dig in and make it better. But when you look at a more moral question, a free program is not guaranteed to be bug-free, but at least there is something in the way things are done to make it hard for people to be nasty to you and help people to work together to make sure the program is not nasty. There's nothing stopping that kind of nastiness in non-free software. What are free software options when all the newer cars have surveillance software? Well, I am hoping to find a skilled mechanic to work with me in a project to make disconnected cars. Because indeed, those are malicious functionalities in those cars. Cars should not be connected. They should not upload anything. They shouldn't be able to. Now, of course, surveillance is not limited to malicious functionalities in the things you own. Other systems are set up that surveil you without your active help. For instance, license plate cameras. I think that surveillance cameras of any sort should be illegal. What we want are security cameras, and the difference is that a security camera accumulates the data locally, and if a crime occurs and an investigation is necessary, then it's feasible to go and collect the data from these various cameras physically, because it's important to do so. But to collect all that data every day is just going to be too much. It wouldn't be economically feasible, and that would make us safe from the misuse of this surveillance capability. Take a look at gnu.org/philosophy/surveillance vs democracy.html. Can privacy protections like HIPAA apply to proprietary software meaningfully? Well, they do, but HIPAA is actually rather weak. When I read the description of that law in the 1990s, what I thought was, this has so many different excuses to get data from your medical records that it's hardly protection at all. And then I realized that there used to be a thing called the medical privilege, that doctors who treated you couldn't be made to testify, but if everything they learned was put into a medical record system, in effect, that privilege became meaningless. It became useless. What is your stance on corporate-backed contributions to GNU/Linux? I think they're fine. I won't reject contributions from anyone just because of thinking that somebody is no good. Sometimes we need to look carefully at the code being contributed. But there are a lot of good contributions that come from companies, and I'm glad we got them. What's your favorite part of the Georgia Tech campus? Unfortunately, I have seen very little of the campus. I saw some of this building and I saw a parking lot. On the other hand, yesterday I went to a wonderful Vietnamese restaurant. I was delighted. I think it's called Nam Phuong. and I recommend it highly. I don't think there's any place as good as that in Boston. How do you apply the free software principles to the hardware side? Well, for the most part, we don't, because hardware and software can both be used to design carrying out a certain computation. But there's a crucial difference about hardware, which is that you can't change what's inside a chip, not the physical structure. It's feasible to change a program and distribute the changed program and for people to install that in place of the previous version. And so people should be free to do that. But since you can't do that for the circuitry in a chip, there's no point arguing that you must be permitted to do so. What use is being permitted to do something that's not feasible to do? But it also, it's a mistake to ask whether a piece of hardware is free. A piece of hardware is likely to have different designs of different parts. It might have a circuit board which has a design. It might have, say, 3 or 50 chips in it, each of which has a different design. Parts of the chip may be different designs. The meaningful question is, given a hardware design, is it free? But because of the fact you can't modify a piece of hardware, not if it's built in a high-tech way, the result is it's useless, it's futile to demand that every chip that you get be made from free hardware designs. At least today it is. In 30 years, we may have personal chip fabricators, and then it would make sense to demand free hardware designs so you could modify the design and make your own chip. When it's feasible to make your own chip, that will become important in the same way that free software is important now. So take a look at gnu.org/philosophy/freehardwaredesigns.html. Are there any applications of radio in the future in free software/computing? Well, there's a program called GNU Radio, which implements software-controlled radio transmitters and receivers. So the answer is yes, and it's already done. What do you use as a computer given Intel has the management engine and AMD has, I don't know what it stands for, but it's something similar. These are hardware backdoors. Well, I use a ThinkPad that is rather old. It's old enough that in this model you can shut off the management engine permanently and never let it run again. That is not possible with newer ThinkPads. So I don't use them. I don't trust them. And this is a serious problem which we can't fix technically. Well, people keep looking for how they can disable the management engine in the newer ThinkPads. But the best they've come up with is you can turn it off once boot has finished. But who knows what nefarious thing it will do to the rest of your computer before reaching that point. So with some sort of leak, it might be possible to figure out how to change the software in the management engine. What I'm hoping is somebody will make computers that don't have this problem. What is the easiest or most efficient way to introduce people to Libre software? Well, I'm not sure, because what I do is teach people about the moral issues at stake. I hope that people can grasp these moral issues. I figure you don't have to be a genius to succeed in understanding what's at stake here. You just heard me do it. Well, it comes out a bit different each time, but you see my method. I figure that if we want free software to be normal in society, we've got to teach people to demand it, to say, I won't stand for that injustice anymore. If you don't mind sharing, what operating system, email system, and other free software tools you use? Well, I'm using the GNU plus Linux system. Specifically, I'm using one of the free distros, which is called Treescale. I read mail and send mail using GNU Emacs. GNU Emacs started out as a text editor, but has been extended to the point you can do almost anything inside it. One of the first extensions I developed was to read and send mail. In fact, that comes from before GNU Emacs. I wrote that in 1975 to use it in Tico before the first Emacs. Have you had any run-ins with any U.S. intelligence surveys that try to push backdoors and vulnerabilities to GNU? No. I don't think that, I would suspect that if they wanted to do that, they wouldn't approach me. What is the OS of choice for desktop, mobile? Well, GNU/Linux is my operating system of choice for desktops. But for mobile devices, basically, they're all bad. And I don't want the tracking that mobile devices do, so I don't want to have one, and I don't. Do you think mobile Linux will grow and eventually compete? Well, it wouldn't make any difference. First of all, when they say Linux, that's not coherent. Android is an operating system that uses Linux as the kernel. There's no GNU in it. If you want to consider an operating system which is not GNU plus Linux, but does have Linux as the kernel, Android is an example of what you mean. So if someone uses the term mobile Linux, I guess why would a person say that and instead of just saying Android? Perhaps it's because that's really the GNU plus Linux system ported to those devices, which I think is a fine thing to do. It's just that you're not going to, those devices are designed so that they're going to restrict you and hurt you. So just using the GNU plus Linux system, that doesn't make it good if there's malicious software that has to be in there for it to work at all. And I'm afraid that there is. What are your thoughts on the core utils rewrite to Rust? Well, I think it shows that some people hate copyleft. They're being taught their way of thinking based on pleasing companies. There are various excuses people can make up for why making companies happy is what determines right and wrong. But if you think that way, you're helping to build a society in which companies can control everyone and mistreat everyone. No democracy and no human rights. What do I think of Rust in general? Well, I don't know the Rust language, but I don't need to know it. I mean, there are lots of languages, and I'm in favor of all languages as long as they're implemented in free software. But there's a problem with Rust in the trademark conditions. It's not clear we don't want to change the Rust compiler ourselves. We really would rather not. It's not our field. We have no technical ideas for it. So what we would want to do is just pass it along. But we are morally obligated to make sure that if somebody gets it from us and wants to make changes for whatever reason, that this doesn't require very difficult things to be done to that package before it can lawfully be distributed. We can't, the trademark conditions on Rust don't make it concretely clear what changes you have to make to be allowed to distribute a modified version. Now, if it's okay if a free license says, well, if you want to commercially distribute a modified version, you've got to change those 5 words over there. That's a minor thing to do. If that's the requirement, it's okay. We'd say it's still free software. The problem with the Rust trademark requirements is we don't know concretely what changes they would require. I sure wish they would clarify this. That might show there's no problem. But it would be nice if there's no problem. Do hardware designs also have to be free? What? I think I answered that one. Look at freehardwaredesigns.html. Do you think we're approaching a time when it will become impossible to accomplish basic tasks in society without proprietary software? Well, people are certainly being pushed in that way. That's why I only pay cash. Now, there is an exception. When I'm doing business with an organization that is sending me a bill to my name, I'm willing to use a check. And usually that's either for utility bills or something medical, something that's prescribed. So I'll pay for those things by check, but everything else, I pay cash. Well, okay, airline tickets also, because they can't be anonymous. I'm willing to pay something other than cash. If I were renting a car, since that can't be anonymous, I'd be willing to pay with a credit card. But as you can see, that means most of life, I still insist on paying cash, because I insist on being anonymous. Do you think, okay. How do you feel about Asahi Project's efforts to reverse engineer and allow the ability to run free software operating systems on newer model Apple ARM computers? I've never heard of it, but it sounds good so far. How do you make compatible free software with profitable software? I'm not sure I understand. I can see 2 meanings for this, but both of them, each of them makes a strange assumption. So, but yes, I think I now understand which meaning is meant. How could the idea of free software be compatible with the idea of getting income from software? But I think I already answered that. Basically, your clients pay you to develop the things they need, and then you provide them to the client as free software, so that you're treating your client ethically, not making your client your prisoner. What do you, if your livelihood depends on non-free software, for example, something in IC design industry? Well, there's some areas where you can't have freedom, and that's lousy, and I wouldn't do those things. But if you mean, how could we change things so that IC design wouldn't involve use of non-free tools supplied by the fabricator? Well, I'm not in a position to implement anything to change that, but I think we could come up with laws that could solve that problem if we could only enact them. Does Libre software, particularly internet-based programs or web servers, have compromises in security? In general, free software is found to be at least as secure as non-free software, which doesn't mean that there are never errors. That's the situation with free software, but I don't know what internet-based programs means. I do know what web servers are. I think that the common causes of bugs in web servers have to do with things that are unrelated to whether things are free or non-free. But I've never done much in the way of web design. I prefer websites to have as little software as possible, especially as little JavaScript as possible. So the websites we run look sort of like what you would have expected around 2005 or so. What are some of your favorite, well, this says Linux distros. Of course, they're not Linux distros. They're distributions of GNU plus Linux. But I don't judge them by the kinds of practical things that most people would. I judge them by, do they respect freedom or not? Do they contain some non-free programs, or do they take a firm stand and refuse to include any non-free programs? Take a look at gnu.org/distros/ well, just look in that directory. You'll find a list of free distros, and then for well-known non-free distros, you'll find explanations of in what way they fail to be free. Net neutrality protections under the FCC are a loss to freedom, which is now approaching a decade since that decision was made. I'm not sure what decision it was, unfortunately. Can you tell me whoever wrote this?
The FCC reclassified the practice of net neutrality to the FTC under their jurisdiction, and that instead moves it from having telecommunication protections to being a different type of entity altogether.
I'm afraid I don't understand that issue. I don't know what to say.
Understood.
But basically, proprietary software has lots of room for doing malicious things. And I suspect that that has an overlap with the problems you're talking about, but I don't know specifically about that question or that decision and what nasty things were permitted as a result.
It largely was the ability to reclassify data as different things instead of data just being data, ultimately.
That's too abstract for me.
It would be a conversation for
Yeah. There are some LLM models that you can run locally using free software. The model, the trained neural net, is made from data that isn't normally released or isn't free. So, as I see it, the training inputs from which a neural net is made are analogous to the source code. They relate to the neural net much as the source code relates to a binary. Of course, the analogy is not perfect. But I think for this purpose, that is it. You know, if people design the weights of the model by tweaking them, then yes, that would be a special thing that wasn't generated from anything else. And so, yeah, you could release that and say this is its own source code. It's like might be like a drawing or a piece of music. It isn't generated from anything else, so there is nothing that could be like its source code. Do you see anything of any chance of the software freedom deterioration changing course? I don't know. We need more people to demand it. We need more people who won't judge questions. Should I install this non-free program because it would be convenient for me to get information from so-and-so? Who will look at that and not judge by convenience overall, but rather freedom overall. When it comes to AI, it seems there are already many productive and creative uses. Well, I think a lot of them are, first of all, it's not, if you're talking about LLMs, it's not intelligence. I won't call it artificial intelligence, just as to discuss it with you. And the uses are often misguided because people expect them to give right answers and they don't. So until people recognize what those systems cannot in fact do, they're not making wise decisions. Do you think we have ethical obligations to avoid forbidden sharing? The question says to pirate. I won't use the word piracy to refer to sharing. Sharing is good and it should be lawful. Those laws are wrong. Copyright, as it is now, is an injustice. And the article copyright vs community .html, it's in the directory gnu.org/philosophy, explains that. Now, so I don't hesitate to share copies of anything. I don't have copies of non-free software because I'm disgusted by it and I won't have copies. I won't use copies. But if you wanted to copy, I probably have some CD-ROMs somewhere that were given to me and have some non-free software on them that I never looked at or used. But if you wanted it, and asked for it, I'd say, well, take the CD. I don't want it anyway. But just because there is a law to give some people unjust power, that doesn't mean breaking that law becomes wrong. Now, as for music, I will share music. Laws to stop people from sharing are an example of divide and rule. They're unjust, directly morally unjust. Dividing people by forbidding them to help each other is nasty. And as far as moving piracy is concerned, well, I like the first Pirates of the Caribbean. But in the second one, they had a bad guy that was a parrot. I like parrots, so I didn't like that one. Now, how to educate kids with Vignier cipher honoring 456 years of cryptographic evolution. I think this is a joke, but unfortunately I don't get it. Universities seem to have come a long way in addressing social inequities, including historical inequities, but the inequities caused by proprietary software is hardly ever mentioned. Why do you think this is? Well, I'm not sure. I would call it, you see, it's not a comparative inequity. It's not that some people are, for no good reason, living better than other people. It's that everybody is being subjugated. If you have anything to do with non-free software in your life, you're being subjugated, and that's wrong to everyone. But most people aren't aware. They don't see. They don't think of the question in terms like these. How to push forward your outraged agenda when you're surrounded by idiots who can't understand its significance. I keep on trying to find examples in everyday life and show them to other people. Do you worry free software is regressing with the rise of, quote, AI, unquote, tools/jobs? I'm not sure. I don't see so far any direct effect of that on free software. Alternative, do you think interest is growing with increasing dissatisfaction with Windows and other such things? I don't know. I would be glad if that's so, but I don't know. How is Libre coming along? Libre is a project to reverse engineer the interfaces to peripherals in portable phones so that Linux can be used as a kernel and control those peripherals without needing non-free device driver code. This is a long-term project. Don't expect progress in a few months. If Netflix, Spotify are DRM and you do not have them, and Blu-rays and DVDs have DRM, how do you see movies? The only way I can see a movie is if I get a file, you know, like an MP4 file or MKV file. And I would get that, I suppose, by copying from somebody else. Sharing is good. Stopping people from sharing is evil. What inspired you to begin GNU and the FSF? Well, the software sharing community had collapsed, had been crushed, and newer computers wouldn't work with free software, and the way of life I had been part of didn't exist anymore. And this was so horrible that I said that I wanted to refound the software sharing community by developing a free operating system so that there would be a base for it to exist. And so in October 1983, I announced the plans for the GNU project. The FSF I founded in October 1985 because the GNU software that existed was attracting a lot of interest and wished to contribute. So it occurred to me and some friends that it might be possible to raise funds to advance free software by creating an organization people could donate to. So we've started the Free Software Foundation, which is a tax-exempt charity. So you can donate to it and take that off of your taxes. What do you think of Vim? I gather it's free software, so ethically, I suppose it's okay. How does free software interact with the right to repair movement? They're very closely related. One of the main obstacles to the right to repair is non-free software. That's why you can't repair your John Deere tractor, because it's got non-free software in there designed to restrict and control you, which is an injustice. So we have to hope that the detractors of John Deere overcome the tractors of John Deere. Large language models are certainly sometimes useful. If training data is publicly known, the training method described and inspectable, and the final weights available, users can download and run the model themselves and, in theory, retrain the model themselves. Does this match the philosophy of Libre software? Yes. Do you hold similar opinion for artworks just as software? No. The conclusions I reached about software relate to the fact that software is made for practical use. You run it to do a job. Now, paintings, you don't use to do a job. You look at them. They're aesthetically valuable, but they're not practical tools for doing something. I think that this is a crucial moral difference. It's acceptable to have somewhat of a copyright system applying to objects of art, statements of opinion, and basically things whose existence isn't dedicated to use. A song or a symphony isn't designed for use. It makes an impression. But a compiler is designed for use. It's a fundamentally different attitude towards the work. You evaluate a program by saying it works well or it works badly. You don't evaluate a song that way. You would have an aesthetic impression of the song. You might criticize it in various ways, praise or disparage it. But those are not practical questions in the way it is for a program. So, because of this, my views about copyright and copying are different for these two categories of works, and that's discussed in copyright vs community.html. In a video you mentioned needing to refuse running your computing on a cloud server that uses non-free software. Actually, I don't use the term cloud server. I never do. But someone else's server. I don't want to get my computing done by someone else's server, because that means someone else controls how my computing is done, and I don't control it. I can't install different software on someone else's server. I can't install a changed version on someone else's server, and I shouldn't be allowed to. That someone else owns that computer. That someone else should have control over that computer, and I have control over my computer. Later, when you mentioned booking airline flights either via phone or in person, I have to assume non-free software is used in both scenarios, not by me. Now, if I am talking to somebody working for an airline who is using the airline's computer system, and that system runs non-free software, well, that may be unjust for the airline. If the airline's computers run Windows, well, Microsoft is mistreating every user of Windows, and that includes the airline. But it's not mistreating me in that scenario. I'm not running Windows. If the airline is using its own proprietary software, well, that's not mistreating the airline. The airline has control over it. It's not mistreating me because I'm not running it. In other words, when I say a non-free program is unjust, it's unjust to the one who is running it. But that doesn't mean, it's not a matter of like contagion. If you're involved in some activity and somebody's running a non-free program, that's not unjust to you. It may be unjust to the one who's running the non-free program. But your role in the situation is another matter. What is a middle-of-the-road approach we could recommend to everyone to take to protect our digital freedom? I don't know if there is one. We can't convince everyone, but we can try harder and convince more people. It's a matter of showing them the injustice that's happening. I can't convince my family to ditch proprietary software. Well, I probably couldn't either. And I just have to live with the fact that a lot of people don't follow what I have to say. And I am not entitled to force them. What I can do to influence people is stick firmly to my principles in my own life. And sometimes that will create practical difficulties. And I don't insist on making it practically inconvenient. I'd rather these things be solvable. But there are limits. People who want to talk with me on WhatsApp will never be able to do so. I'm not going to run that. Unless that were to become, unless the client were to be free software, in which case maybe I would for some purposes. How does an ATM running proprietary software differ from a server running proprietary software? Well, first of all, the term cloud service is meaningless. It's just confusion. I never use that term. Let's talk about a server that is running some kind of non-free software to do something for me or with me. Well, morally, what matters is what it's doing for me. Suppose it was going to do video editing for me. Suppose I was going to do video editing by uploading some video, and then it would have commands to do video editing. I would say this is unjust. I deserve to do that video editing using my own free program in my own computer so that it's under my control. And in fact, you can do that, and that's how I would do it, surely. Then what if, say, it's a web server that lets me subscribe to some mailing list? Well, that's fine. It wouldn't make me run any non-free software to do that normally. So, okay, why not? I just do it. It's a matter of what what it's actually doing for me and how that relates to me. Is it my computing, or is it something about what they're going to do for me that's not just computing? Subscribing me or unsubscribing me on a mailing list is not doing my computing. It's configuring my communication. And if it's doing that the way I ask for, that's okay. Someone's asking me about a misunderstanding of comments I made about Epstein. It's too bad that they wouldn't pay attention to how they misread my words. But if you want to see the explanation, look at stallmansupport.org. Now this one, is there any danger to saying GPL version 3 or later? Could there potentially be future bad actors which craft GPL v4 and leverage this retroactively on existing copyleft software? Not really. The first thing to note is, if a program says GPL version 3 or later, and the FSF releases a GPL version 4, because this is limited to versions of the GPL released in the future by the Free Software Foundation. Someone else can't release something and call it GPL v4 and have it apply. But the next point is, everyone will still be permitted to use those programs under GPL v3. So the worst danger is that we might be too permissive in a GPL v4. And yeah, that could cause some kinds of drawbacks if we made that mistake. But it wouldn't be a disaster. And the thing is, to worry excessively about far-fetched bad possibilities when we're surrounded by much worse things happening all the time around us is perhaps misguided. There is no institution in the world that is absolutely impossible to steer in the wrong direction, or that could never make a bad decision. If that's what you're demanding the impossible. But if you're not trying to demand that, you should recognize we're fighting active, nasty campaigns that are doing lots of injustice, and we're fighting against them. So please join us and help. When you were building GNU, what did you start with? Oh, to bootstrap it, I ran GNU packages on Unix. After all, GNU is not Unix. GNU is a free Unix-like operating system. And the architecture of Unix being modular, we could replace individual modules of it with free programs and use those free programs together with the remaining non-free modules of Unix. Is it immoral to work for a company that sells non-free software? Not necessarily. It depends what you're doing. I know somebody who develops some free software working for Google. What he's doing is good. If you could manage to get paid by a company to do something that's legitimate and good, great. What do you think about Torvald's reservation towards the GPL v3 version of the license? Well, as I recall, he valued the amount of adoption of Linux, the kernel, over defending people from malicious functionalities, specifically from TiVoization, which is a way of implementing DRM. I think that was a fundamental mistake, and that the world is worse off because he made that mistake. What do you hope to accomplish in the next 10 or 20 years with this movement? Well, sad to say, I probably won't see what happens in the next 10 years. I'm getting old. I may still be alive in 10 years, but I wouldn't count on that. It's not going to be up to me for that long. You know, an orthopedist told me that someday I was going to need a total hip replacement. And it seems that there's a campaign of people who demand to replace me with somebody younger and more hip. So, we don't have enough control over the situation to be able to plan for specific goals. We can plan for what direction to push in. You talked about software, but do you see a, quote, war on general computing, unquote? Many developers have been piggybacking on gamers, but gaming machines may disappear in favor of streaming and hyper, I don't know what that is, hyper something, or non-standard servers, which may cause, well, I don't pay much attention to games. They're almost all proprietary software, so let them end up in the trash. You won't get screwed from not playing a game. So, among all the areas of software, that's not one that we desperately need to liberate. There are some free games implemented in free software, which is nice if you've got time to play a game. Now, there's some more questions, but maybe I should proceed to the auction and to the sales. There's a sales table in the back where you can buy various Free Software Foundation merchandise. But please, what you should do is join the Free Software Foundation. Help our cause. Wishing for us to win is sort of ineffective, but joining in and supporting our work starts to be effective. Buying our merchandise starts to be effective. Now, I have some things here that I want to auction for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. For instance, here is a hardcover copy of Free Software, Free Society, 3rd edition. And I'm going to auction it for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation, which is also its publisher. And if you like, I'll sign it for you. And I'm going to start by asking for $70. Do I get $70 for this adorable book? When you bid, please shout out the amount you're bidding. What?
75.
What?
75.
Let's go up by at least $10 so that we don't take quite so long to reach wherever we reach.
80.
I've got 80. Do I get 90? I got 90. Do I get 100? Do I get 100 for this adorable book? Which you can also use to bang your head a little. I've got 100. Do I get 110? Do I get 110 for this adorable book? Do I get 110? Last, how much? I got 110. Do I get 120? Do I get 120? Last chance to bid 120 or more. Going, gone for 110. So, the thing that we can accept directly is cash, but there is a way to pay with a credit card, but it's a bit of work. Yeah, that's great. That's a great method. Okay, so this will be here along with me until you're ready. And now, here is an adorable GNU that needs a home that I'm going to auction for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. And if you buy it, I will sign the card for you. And I'm going to start. Oops. I'm going to start with $80. Do I get $80 for this adorable GNU? How much?
80.
I've got 80. Do I get 90? I've got 80. Do I get 90 for this?
90.
I've got, is that you?
Yeah.
I've got 90. Do I get 100? 100. Do I get 110? Do I get 110 for this adorable GNU? How much? I've got 110. Do I get 120? I've got 110. Do I get 120 for this adorable GNU? How many? 120. Do I get 130? Do I get 130 for this adorable GNU?
200.
I've got 200. Do I get 220? I've got 200. Do I get 220 for this adorable GNU? I've got 220. Do I get 240? This is an auction, and we're raising more and more money for the Free Software Foundation, which is good. I've got 220. Do I get 240? 240, anybody?
240.
I've got 240. Do I get 260? 260 to the Free Software Foundation to advance the free software movement. I got 260. Do I get 280? Do I get 280? Gone for 260. Okay.
Salary.
Okay, and now here is the GNU Emacs manual for version 27.2. And I'm going to start with $70. And of course, I'll sign this for you if you wish. So, do I get $70 for this adorable book? Did you just bid?
Yeah, 70.
70. I got 70.
100.
You said 100?
100.
I got 100. Do I get 110? Do I get 110 for this adorable book?
120.
120. I got 120. Do I get 130?
150.
I got 150. Do I get 160? I got 150. Do I get 160 for this adorable book? 160 or more to the Free Software Foundation to defend freedom. Last chance to bid 160 or more for this adorable book. Gone for 150. Thank you. Okay, well, I won't keep it, but the FSF will. So, you want the book, I suppose?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you just open it. And, and you want me to dedicate it to any particular name?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So those are all the auction items, but you can still buy much less expensive FSF merchandise over there. So I think we're done.
Thank you.